Greetings, mortals. Some cults pray in silence. Others carve their devotion in blood. Tonight, we travel to the borderlands of Texas and Mexico, where in 1989, a cult so depraved, so twisted by darkness, was discovered that it shook even the most hardened investigators to their core. They were not just murderers. They were sorcerers, dealers of death, and disciples of something far older than human law. They did not seek redemption. They sought power, immunity, and blood-soaked ascension. This is the true story of the narco-satanists, a drug cartel death cult that left behind a trail of bodies, rituals, and something far more terrifying than just crime. Gather close, dear listeners, for tonight's entry into Tapes of the Lost will leave you questioning how deep the darkness truly runs.
It all began with a man named Adolfo de Jesus Constanzo. By the time he was in his early 20s, Constanzo had already studied the dark arts, not just any occult practices, but the deadly rites of Palo Mayombe, an Afro-Cuban religion that deals in spirits, sacrifices, and blood magic. Constanzo was no ordinary con artist or street hustler. He sought true power, power through death, through offerings, through rituals soaked in suffering. He soon found himself deep in the Mexican drug trade, offering ritual protection spells to cartel bosses, claiming his black magic could make them invisible to police bullets and untouchable by the law, and they believed him. By 1987, Constanzo had built a loyal following of drug traffickers, cartel enforcers, and fanatical disciples. They called him El Padrino, the Godfather, and his word was law. At first, the rituals were simple offerings, chickens, goats, snakes. But soon, Constanzo claimed that the spirits wanted more. Dogs were skinned alive and burned in ceremonial pits. Black cauldrons, known as ngangas, were filled with blood, bones, and human remains. Victims were chosen based on their spiritual weakness, those who would feed the gods with their pain. Members of his cult, known as Los Narco-Satanicos, believed that by offering human lives, they would become invincible, protected by the spirits of Palo Mayombe, shielded from bullets, from prison, from death itself. And so, they began hunting. Their first human victims were rivals, cartel members who had crossed the wrong people. They were kidnapped, brought to the remote Matamoros ranch, where they were stripped, bound, and forced to kneel before the Nganga cauldron. Constanzo would whisper strange incantations, his hands covered in blood-soaked beads, before ordering his followers to torture the victims. Some were beaten beyond recognition. Others were slowly carved apart, their fingers, ears, and genitals removed before being cast into the cauldron as offerings. This was no longer just a cartel ritual. This was something far worse. Then, on March 14th, 1989, the narco-satanists made their deadliest mistake. That night, 21-year-old Mark Kilroy, an American college student from Texas, was in Matamoros for spring break. He and his friends had been drinking, partying, typical tourist fun. But as he walked to meet his friends, a dark car pulled up beside him. Kilroy was grabbed by 4 men, thrown into a beat-up Chevy Suburban, and driven to the Matamoros ranch. He had no idea that he had just been selected for a sacrifice. For over 12 hours, Kilroy was tortured beyond belief. His fingertips were sliced off, one by one, offered to the spirits. He was beaten, stabbed, and mutilated as Constanzo and his cult chanted around him. Finally, his brain was cut out and placed in the Nganga cauldron, his spinal column removed as a ritual staff. His body was discarded like garbage, left buried in a shallow grave, alongside at least 15 other victims. But this time, the cult had made a mistake, because Mark Kilroy was an American, and his disappearance would bring the full weight of US and Mexican law enforcement upon them. When Kilroy's family reported him missing, US authorities put immediate pressure on Mexican police. Soon, an undercover investigation led them straight to the Matamoros ranch. On April 9, 1989, police raided the property. What they found was beyond anything they had ever seen before. A pit filled with decomposing human remains, some missing fingers, ears, genitals, a cauldron overflowing with rotting flesh, blood, and animal bones. Evidence that dozens, possibly hundreds, had been sacrificed in the name of protection. And worst of all, the scent. One officer later said, "I've been on crime scenes. I've smelled death before. But this was something else. It was ancient. It was like hell itself had been opened." As police closed in, Constanzo refused to be taken alive. On May 6, 1989, as officers surrounded his apartment, he ordered one of his followers to shoot him, a final sacrifice to his dark gods. When police entered the building, they found his bullet-riddled corpse alongside his lover and high priestess, Sarah Aldrete. The narco-satanists were finally finished, but their legend would never die. In the years since, the legend of the Matamoros narco-satanists has only grown. Some believe the cult never truly ended, that its disciples still operate in secret, performing sacrifices deep in the borderlands. Others whisper that Constanzo's spirit lingers, trapped between this world and the next, waiting for his followers to bring him back. And the question remains: did Constanzo truly believe in the magic he preached? Or was he simply a man consumed by madness and bloodlust? Maybe it doesn't matter, because in the end, he got exactly what he wanted: power, fear, and a name that still haunts the deserts of Mexico.
They thought they could buy power with blood, but power demands more than flesh. It demands devotion, obedience, sacrifice. And in the end, it always takes more than you're willing to give. Adolfo Constanzo wanted to be a god, but gods do not fear death. And when the blade turned against him, he learned what all men learn in the end. You cannot bargain with the abyss. The abyss always collects.